If you want something to be true, then it's easy to ignore considerations that count against it. That's just
Those are biases.
human psychology, right? So we're all subject to self-deception. In a religious community, though, there's something that's often really, really significant in this context, which is the patterns of thought that might disable certain forms of self-deception are not encouraged.
We aspire to become awakened beings, to live in harmony with the truth of life.
From Vast Noodle Media, I'm Trent Bell. This is Knowing and Believing, a podcast about how we believe.
Welcome to another episode of Knowing and Believing. Today, I'm super excited that we are going to be sitting down with Dr. David Livingstone Smith. He is a philosophy professor at University of New England. His expertise is in philosophy of psychology, philosophy of biology, race, mind, metaphysics, free will, and determinism, human nature, dehumanization, and ideology. So I've gotten to a lot of deep issues and am currently experiencing a existential crisis, loss of meaning that I'm trying to work through. And I'm very excited to talk to someone who can really speak on these deeper issues, that is an expert in these areas. So without further ado, let's go into that conversation now. So, Dr. David Livingstone Smith, I'm so very excited to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak on this podcast, Knowing and Believing. Your expertise and your personal interests and areas of interest and study intersect with everything that I'm currently struggling with and going through, and relate to basically everything I'm working on with this other project, Vast Noodle, that I'm working on. And so it's a real joy to have you here. So
well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I hope I don't lead you astray.
Oh, no, I don't think you will. Let's jump right into it, as not to waste your time, because I'll go on forever talking, and I need to talk less and let guests talk more, so I'm working on that. But my first thing I'd love to hear from you is basically around the title of this podcast, Knowing and Believing. To you, philosophically, what is this difference between knowing and believing? Knowing, kind of inferring certainty; believing, what is belief and what is knowing, and the difference within your expertise?
Okay, so these are philosophically significant terms, and there's a lot of disagreement among philosophers exactly how they should be understood.
All right.
So my view is a fairly traditional one, I think. Believing, at least as philosophers use the term, has to do with commitment to the truth of something. So when you say you believe something, that's another way of saying you think that that something is true. And the something is going to be what we call a proposition, like a statement, like the sky is blue, or angels exist, or something like that. So a belief state is kind of a state of commitment to the truth of a claim.
Okay.
Now, if you look at it that way, belief is part of knowledge. So it would be very strange to say that you know something, but you don't believe it, right?
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
Whereas you might be uncertain about it. That's fine. That's good.
Right.
So when we philosophers talk about belief and knowledge, that doesn't imply certainty, because of course there are very few things, if anything, that we can be certain of.
That's definitely what I've come to embrace more so.
Yeah. So, knowledge is always fallible. And the appropriate attitude of intellectual humility, is to embrace that fallibility. I might be wrong, but given my sincerest efforts and all of the evidence available to me, this is the best story that I can come up with. So we talk about, rather than certainty, we talk about warrant. What sorts of claims are warranted? That is, what sorts of claims do the evidence best support?
Right. So to me, it seems like baked into the word belief is, I don't know this objectively. I cannot prove this objectively. It is not a certain thing, but I do think that it's the truth. I just can't completely prove it right here, right now.
Well, there's another distinction that I think is worth making. Traditionally, philosophers have saw knowledge as justified, true belief. Let me unpack
Knowledge
that.
as justified
True belief.
Okay.
That's known as the traditional analysis, or JTB,
Okay.
for short. So, first of all, as I pointed out, if you're going to say you know something, part of that must be that you believe it to be the case.
Sure. Right.
Okay. In addition to that, what you believe must be true to count as knowledge. So I might believe that the ghost of Elvis is in this room, but I don't know it because there isn't any ghost of Elvis, right?
Not that we can prove, right?
Not with, yeah, we have no good reason to think.
Right.
That
Even though the Inquirer might,
Yeah, that great authoritative source. Okay, so why not just say knowledge is true belief? Well, think of it this way. You might wake up in the morning with the feeling, I feel really lucky. And I feel so lucky that if I buy a lottery ticket, I'm going to win. And so you go out and you buy a lottery ticket and you win. You got lucky. Did you know you were going to win? Well, probably not. What probably happened was there was this very pleasant convergence between your belief and reality. So you had a belief. The belief turned out to be true. You did win the lottery.
Well, if the belief was true that you are lucky,
I think you're pretty lucky if you win the lottery.
but luck is nothing other than coincidence. It seems. I don't.
Yeah, but you did win. So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
just let's go to the point where you said, if I buy a lottery ticket, I'm going to win that lottery.
Right.
Well, that turned out to be true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you had a true belief. Well, why wasn't it knowledge? Because it wasn't justified. So what we mean by justified is having good reasons to kind of underpin or underwrite the belief.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have any. I mean, just waking up feeling lucky
Right.
isn't a good reason, objectively speaking, for believing that you're going to win the lottery,
Right.
and therefore you didn't know it. So you need all those three elements. Often when people talk about belief, they're leaving out the justification bit, right? So you can have a belief without justification.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of coincides with what you were just saying, right? We don't have to say you're uncertain of it. What we have to say is a belief without justification is a belief you don't have good reasons
Right.
for holding.
Okay. Yeah, it's a hard thing growing up. As I grew up in a very what I would call a certainty-based culture of religious belief, and it wouldn't have been something that an academic authority within that belief system would have said, I am certain there is a God. This is the definition of certainty, and you all should be certain. But it was absolutely the cultural posture, if you will,
Yeah.
right? And so I remember in my teens, I came up with this analogy or thought picture of if there was a gun that would go off if you weren't telling the truth, would I put my head up to it and say, I certainly believe there's a God? No, I wouldn't have ever done that. But yet everyone around me, kind of professed and seemed like they had this certainty of faith, certainty of belief in God that wasn't discussed as this is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be wrong, and I'm open to that discussion. It was far more a concrete thing, and if you push people, are you certain about this? The correct answer within that culture generally was, well, yes, I'm certain of it. And to come out of that, I'm finding is incredibly difficult, because now I know belief has a purpose for people in finding meaning, and you kind of believe beyond what you can prove. but you have justifications for it, and now I'm left with this kind of resentment towards belief that kind of pushes me into maybe a materialist, strong skeptic, nihilist position, which emotionally isn't fun for me.
Okay.
Having been for 40 some years another way. So that's hard. But that's a good summary of the difference of knowing and believing.
Yeah.
What is your take? I know one of your interests or expertise is the philosophy of psychology. What is your knowledge of and take on the idea or the reality of imprinting as a person grows? So there's, I think Oxford did a study that there were three things that were kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but there are three things that were key markers of bringing someone into belief. And that was, one of them was that when they're transitioning as a kid from realizing mom and dad don't know everything and are not all powerful, you then introduce this idea of God. And then I forget what the other two were, but as being imprinted with this idea of certainly there is a God, now I'm left with the lack of trust of my own feelings and intuitions around those things. And is there any consensus on psychological imprinting and belief within that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can really answer that question, as I'm unfamiliar with the study that you're referring to, but I can certainly respond to what you've just said.
All right.
A great deal, perhaps most, of what we say we know, we get from others. This is called the testimony amongst philosophers, right? So almost everything, I'm a professor. I teach undergraduates. Almost all of what they say they know as a result of being here at the university is what people have told them, or what they've read in books, right? It's not a matter of direct experience. It's a matter of taking as true the reports of others. And outside of a formal education, it's very much the same. As we grow, as we acquire knowledge, a great deal of that knowledge, or a great deal, I should say, of that belief, some of it counts as knowledge, some of it doesn't, is stuff we get from our parents, from our family members, from respected members of our community. And that's just natural, right?
Right.
But it can lead to really bad things, because people around you as you're growing up may be wrong. And they may be wrong in very, very serious ways. If your parents had been members of the Ku Klux Klan, you would have acquired a set of beliefs about race which would be not only false, but destructive. Right? So there comes a point when we're cognitively equipped to start questioning what we're told. Ideally, we grow up in a situation where this is encouraged. So I can think of my kids asking me if God exists. Both of them went to a wonderful preschool that was run by fundamentalist Christians. And of course, they'd hear all this stuff and they'd come back and they'd ask me that, and I'd say, well, I don't think God exists. There are a lot of people that do. Let's think it through. Let's figure out what you think is right.
Right.
And we could have a philosophical dialogue about that. They both ended up atheists, by the way. So there are things that people around you can do to make that transition easier, less painful, in fact pleasurable, or the reverse. Growing up in a community like you did, you really would have to swim against the tide psychologically. It seems like there is no support for really honestly examining the warrant for these sorts of claims.
Yeah, the very critical discussion of it is not present in the last, I'm finding, maybe it's just because I'm more aware of it, but I'm finding in the last 3 years, 2-3 years, there's been a lot more open dialogue about the criticisms that atheism will throw at religion.
Yeah.
You know, which in many cases is very, very justified.
Yeah.
And there's been more of that, which is encouraging to just think that people of religious beliefs are attempting to, self-examine them and be honest about them,
Yeah.
and improve on the areas
Yeah.
where they're maybe being unfair to individuals of, we'll say, a different disposition,
Yeah.
so on, so forth.
Yeah.
So, that's encouraging.
See, I think very often religious people, the attitude towards the doctrines is more an attitude of commitment than belief. Let me explain that. The way I understand belief is belief is a kind of mental state that structures the way we live, right? So the way we live, in at least for many, many beliefs, there are obviously beliefs that don't fit this category, is in accord with what we believe. Now, what we
Right.
say is not necessarily what we believe, right? So we have to look at how people live and look at what they say and see how the two match up or fail to match up.
Right.
What people say is often what I would call an expression of commitment, right? They feel that they should be 100% behind certain claims.
Mm-hmm.
But this might not have much behavior structuring influence apart from certain social things, right? So I think the analogy is sort of the attitude to sports teams, the fans.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a Red Sox fan, I'm not interested in sports at all. But I gather maybe this is why I'm so sensitive
makes
to this.
two of us.
Yeah. So the Red Sox fan will unhesitatingly say Red Sox are the greatest team in the world.
Yeah.
Right. This is how the Red Sox have actually performed is irrelevant to that judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Saying the Red Sox are the greatest team in the world is an expression of commitment to the Red Sox, right? So that's what I think goes on in a lot of these communities.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at how people live their lives, they're often not walking the walk. They're not living really as Christians should live if they actually absolutely believe this stuff.
And I mean, my pushback on that to a degree would be that, no one's perfect, but they're trying. So, I take that with a grain of salt. I'm more insistent at this point on like the validity of the claims. Are they true or false? Because I can accept that.
Yeah.
I hate religion because there's humans involved, and I'm just not a group person. And this has been very difficult for me because I don't meld well in a group situation.
Yeah.
It's just not me. Like, I get so allergic to that. Where if I was in the early eons of Homo sapiens existence, I would have been picked off pretty quick because I would have been out on my own and saber-tooth would have gotten me.
Yeah.
And, but here I am now in this time period, and I have all this information and everything else available to me, but the mass population of our, world now are here because of the genetic ability to tell story, follow myth, and get united behind that. I'm pulling a lot of this from the book Sapien. I don't know if you've read that.
I haven't read.
It's a really interesting book. No matter how you believe how the world came about, it's interesting, but also very conflicting for me because I'm not the ideal for this time period.
Yeah.
I'm not a group person, which is like we're here because we work like ants almost, you know, we all get together and that's our power.
We're hypersocial.
And I'm going the opposite way, and I get itchy if I feel like I'm not unique, you know, which is ridiculous. But like I'm going to be unique out of 7 billion. But anyways, so the place I found real rock bottom for me in this discussion that was the intersection of faith and reason and philosophical discussion was free will. I had never really even thought about it. It was like a laughable subject to me as a religious person. It was like, yeah, of course. I wasn't a Calvinist. They believe in hard determinism, whereas a hard atheist might also believe in hard determinism, which is very interesting to me. But it was a laughable thing to me. But as you start to read into it and look into it, it's like, oh, okay, this is a very nuanced and very interesting conversation. If you could give your best definition of free will, because often that's the hardest part about this discussion, is really defining what is free will or will, and then the three main camps. Hard determinism, compatibilism, and liberalism? Or Libertarianism.
Yeah. Okay, so the way I start this conversation with my students is I ask them what they think it is to be free. And usually the most popular view is, well, you're free to the extent that you can do what you choose. Okay. And so I said, well, okay, let's take that as the baseline. That's what we mean by free will. There's an old problem associated with free will, which has to do with the relationship between freedom and determinism.
Okay.
So what's determinism? Determinism is the view that everything that happens is caused by prior things that happened. And it's caused in accord with laws, which are just regularities. So you throw a wine glass at the wall, it's going to shatter. It's not going to turn into a bluebird and fly away, right? And it's the wine glass striking the wall that's causing it to shatter. Right, so this idea of determinism can be expressed in another way as well, which starts getting people a little bit worried. And that's the view that there's only one physically possible future. If everything that happens is caused by prior things that happen in accord with laws, and that includes all the events that happen in your own mind, because those things happen too.
Yeah, everything within the realm of matter, within the realm of the universe.
Yeah, that's right. And even if there are non-material things, it would apply to those as well, by the way. So only one possible future. And that implies that an infinitely powerful intelligence, which we philosophers, most of us are atheists, by the way, like to call the mind of God, were to look at a time slice of the universe, say 1 billion years ago, and this infinitely powerful intelligence would be acquainted with all the laws of physics and would know the position and trajectory and momentum of every particle in the universe. That infinitely powerful intelligence could predict that you and I would exist, and at precisely this moment, we would be sitting here saying what we're saying, and could even tell us, well, not in my case, but in your case, the position of every hair on your head. Okay, so when you start thinking that some of the things that happen, well, let me go back a little bit. Determinism has been a very, very fruitful idea, and we count on it every day of our lives. So you go out to start your car, you turn the key in the ignition, the motor just makes a sound, the click, click, click sound. You say, oh, that must have been caused by my battery being dead. What caused my battery being dead? I must have left the light on last night, and so on.
Right.
So you invoke a deterministic explanation for that, your failure of your car to start. If you were to suddenly get a pain in your side, you would consult a physician. Why? First of all, in the hope that the physician could tell you what's causing the pain, and second, that the physician could cause it to go away. So determinism, the idea of determinism, is something we take for granted, we use all the time, and it's very much the basis of a great deal of our science, which looks for regularities in the world. But people start to freak out when they start thinking of the implications of this for their own choosing. So if my choices are determined, that is, they're caused by prior events, and those events were caused by prior events, and those events are caused by prior events in what we call a causal chain, going back before we're born,
Right.
then our metaphorical mind of God could, looking at a time slice of the universe 1 billion years ago, predict every choice everyone would make.
Right.
Okay. And then people say, oh my God, that means I'm not free.
Right.
Right. That's the problem. That's the word.
It doesn't feel nice to think about that as a standard human, as me, standard human, thinking like, well, wait a minute, I'm just reacting. I'm not actually making choices. I'm not free.
Okay, so I'm going to try and free you from that bad feeling.
Let's do that.
Okay, we're going to do some therapy here. Okay, so there are two general views of the free will problem. That is the relationship between free will and determinism.
Okay.
One is called incompatibilism. The other is called compatibilism. Incompatibilism has two varieties, hard determinism and libertarianism.
Okay.
So if you're an incompatibilist, you think that freedom cannot exist in a deterministic universe.
Right.
So either the universe is entirely deterministic, or at least deterministic in ways that matter for this question, and freedom doesn't exist, or freedom does exist and the universe is not entirely deterministic. That is, there's a loophole.
Right.
Okay. The first of those positions is called hard determinism. Hard determinism is the view that, first of all, if the universe is deterministic, then freedom doesn't exist. The universe is deterministic, therefore freedom doesn't exist.
Right.
Simple argument.
Hard determinism.
Hard determinism. Okay. So it's very important to make a distinction between determinism and hard determinism.
Okay.
Because compatibilists are determinists too.
Okay.
Okay. So none of us is free on this view. And that means none of us is morally responsible for our actions, because the idea is to be morally responsible for what you do. There had to be an option. You had to be able to do otherwise. But if you couldn't do otherwise, then it would be absurd to say you're morally responsible. So if I were to say, Trent, you're a bad man, you know why?
I had no choice in that.
You didn't travel back in time and kill Hitler.
Right.
Well, that would be a strange charge, because you couldn't do that, right? You were not responsible for Hitler's life or his non-death and in infancy or something like that. Okay, so a lot of people don't like that. Hard determinists would say, well, suck it up, that's how it is. Amongst philosophers, this is a fairly unpopular view.
Really?
Very few philosophers are hard determinists. Okay, let's go to libertarianism, not to be confused with...
Now, what is the distinction between... Now, that's hard determinism. Determinism...
Determinism is the view that everything that happens was caused by prior events.
Okay, not necessarily that further down the track they're also locked in as much as it's an ongoing growth of...
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like hard determinism would say that there's a original causality chain, and hard determinism, were you to have a computer or whatever strong enough, you would know the results.
No, a determinist, just plain old determinists can say that.
Say that as well.
What the hard determinists add something. Determinism is true, and that means nobody's free.
Okay, all right.
So hard determinism is about the relationship between determinism and freedom.
Hard determinism. Okay.
All
right.
So libertarianism should not be confused with the live free or die sort of political libertarianism.
So everyone in New Hampshire is not
yeah, no, they're not. They don't all have a commitment to a certain view of free will. So if you're a libertarian, you accept that same premise as the hard determinists. Basically, they're really similar. If the universe is deterministic, then freedom doesn't exist. But the libertarian then says, yeah, but freedom does exist. At least some of our choices are free choices. Therefore, right, no, so let me rephrase that a little bit. If the universe is deterministic, nobody is free, but we are free, at least to some extent. Therefore, the universe is not wholly deterministic.
Okay.
Libertarians don't say stupid things like nothing is deterministic. They just say some of our choices are not determined by prior events. Okay. Well, in some ways, that's kind of attractive in that it recaptures moral responsibility. You know, those choices that we can genuinely make freely, we are morally responsible for making. And it preserves the sort of determinism that's important for science and everyday life as well. The problem is libertarianism seems pretty unintelligible if you look at it closely. Suppose the following. Freedom exists or it doesn't. We have to accept that. Any statement of that form we have to accept as true. Well, if you're an incompatibilist, if you think freedom and determinism rule each other out, then if the universe is deterministic, then there's no freedom. Right? Well, what about if the universe isn't wholly deterministic? What about if some of our choices are not determined? Well, what are they then? Well, they're random. But randomness doesn't give us freedom at all. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah, no.
So imagine I were to propose this to you. Here's a revolver. You can either shoot yourself in the head or I write you a check for $1 million. But you have to decide this on a coin flip.
Yeah.
You don't feel real free, do you?
No.
So if the choice is between determinism and randomness, that's really bad. That's like living your life through a series of coin flips, right?
Yeah.
It isn't freedom enhancing at all.
Yeah, no.
Right. So
it feels the same to me, as far as my freedom's concerned.
All right. So now let me urge you towards preferring a deterministic view.
Okay.
I would guess you would want your actions to be determined by your values and your beliefs and your desires. That is...
I'd want them to be determined by my own conscious decision.
Okay, let's take it a step back then. Let's talk about your decisions. Would you like your decisions to be in accord with your values and beliefs? What you think?
Not if I was raised by, it depends.
Right. No, but I'm talking about you now. Let me give you a concrete example.
Okay.
Let's suppose that you're hungry and you really like pizza.
Yep.
And you know where you can get some really good pizza. Would you want it to be the case? And there's no other countervailing factor like, you're trying not to eat gluten or you're trying to lose weight. Obviously, you're not trying to lose weight.
I'm trying to lose weight and I can't eat gluten and I'm
right.
vegan,
We're gonna exclude all those things, right? So wouldn't it be the case that you would want your decision about what to eat to be based on what you like to eat and what you know is available and so on and so forth? I think there's no doubt that you would.
Sure.
Of course you would. Now imagine if there wasn't a deterministic relationship between your values and desires and beliefs and your choices and your actions. You could have all those things, you love pizza, you know where to get it, so on and so forth, but you decide to eat, I don't know,
salad.
Kale,
Yeah.
right? That would be a consequence of a lack of deterministic relationship between your desires, beliefs, and so on, and your choices. And let's look at it slightly in a different way. Let's suppose you make the choice to get a slice of pizza. Unless there's a deterministic relationship between that decision and your actions, you might decide to go and buy a slice of pizza, but end up doing an impersonation of a chicken or something like that. There's not that secure connection.
Right.
That's why some philosophers say that determinism is actually necessary for freedom. It's necessary for a person to act in this kind of integrated way,
Right.
so that they actually do behave in ways that reflect their values and commitments and desires and beliefs and so on. Sever those connections, and and you lose that sort of integration.
Right.
Okay, one of the issues here, like we can move to compatibilism now, right? So we have hard determinism, we have libertarianism. They're both forms of incompatibilism. They both have their upsides and their downsides. Now let's go to compatibilism. The compatibilist says, look, you incompatibilists have been confusing a couple of things. You think that to be free, our decisions and our actions must be uncaused. I don't agree with that at all.
I mean, everything is caused.
Yeah. So the incompatibilist says, well, if everything is caused, at least the hard determinism says, actually both say, if everything is caused, then nobody's free. The compatibilist says, no, I don't buy that. Freedom and determinism are not only compatible, but they need each other, or at least freedom needs determinism. So the compatibilist says, look, the mistake that you guys have been making is that you think freedom equals uncaused. What you should be thinking is freedom means uncoerced, right? So,
But everything, that feels the same to me. Everything's still coerced. I mean, like my choice to eat pizza is coerced by my, past experience of enjoying cheese and melted and.
but you're confused. I want to work you out of that feeling the same, because they're not the same. There's a big difference between eating pizza because you want to eat pizza and somebody holding a gun to your head and saying, eat pizza or I'll blow your brains out.
Coercion is more outside. It's causality without choice. Okay.
Don't you want what you eat to be caused by what you like?
Right, rather than this was the railroad tracks to pizza. I had no choice in it.
Exactly.
You want to feel like there's an asphalt
You
road.
do have
you
a
could
choice.
Go there
It's
either.
just that your choices are caused by all sorts of other things.
Yeah,
They're
a
caused
billion different things.
by your mental
constantly.
state, a millisecond before the choice. They're caused by your genetics. They're caused by your upbringing. If you'd never experienced pizza, or if you've been taught that cheese is poisonous or something like that, then your desires would be different. But they're not. They are as they are. So compatibilist says, we don't have to worry about how our desires and beliefs and so on, how our choices come about, as much as the incompatibilists think. What's relevant is, can we do what we choose? That's what matters for freedom.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
I've chosen a certain set of words in explaining this to you. Of course, there's a causal story about how I happened to choose this set of words. I mean, the fact that I was born into an English-speaking family is a big part of that, right? That doesn't make me unfree, right? What would make me unfree would be that if the FBI threatened me to read a memorized script to you, or else I would be imprisoned, something
Right.
like that.
Right. That's coercion.
Yeah, that's coercion. So, compatibilist says, look, if we look at, that's the sort of, to use Daniel Dennett's phrase, that's the sort of free will worth wanting. If we look at freedom in that sort of way, then freedom and determinism sit quite happily together.
Right.
So let me illustrate just one more time why compatibilists like me think that incompatibilism is crazy. Suppose you were to act on your decision to have pizza.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out to some pizza place, you're about to put a delicious slice of pizza into your mouth, and then you think the following: oh my God, I'm not free. I'm eating this pizza because I want pizza. Right? That would be crazy.
Right.
And
Right.
that because is causal. And you don't have any choice about what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help what you want. You can choose to act on your wants or not.
Right.
And there's a causal story for that as well. So if we look at causation as incompatible with freedom, that implies that the only free acts we could possibly perform are acts that we don't want to perform, that are not in accord with our beliefs and values and so on.
Right.
And that also seems insane. So those are the three positions.
Right.
Basically.
Those are coming into focus a little better for me now. So about I think it was last spring, I sat down and really tried to write and figure out all of this, and I had this weird mental picture. And in considering you're not a hard determinist,
I'm a
not
compatibilist.
So if hard determinism is interesting to me simply because I know there's people out there who hold an idea of God that are Calvinists. I think Baptists are that way. And it just blows my mind that you would worship something that creates billions of people knowing that they're going to burn eternally. I've been burnt a little.
Yeah.
What?
That's the number one most sadistic idea that anyone has come up with.
It's just mind-blowing to me. And I was previously Seventh-day Adventist. They don't believe in hell. They just believe in death basically being, we've all been dead before. It happened before we were born. And that's what it feels like, So that's kind of calmed my fear of death. It's like a Band-Aid right now. I'm just kind of like, death is like before you were born. Okay, I can get behind that. But in a hard determinist view, you got to think that technology someday, given another billion years, could maybe get to the point where we harness the power of a star to power a computer. And then it could, map everything that exists in the universe, and then be able to, if hard determinism is the deal, tell us this is what's going to happen. Well, then we have created for ourselves essentially a God that can tell us the future. So then the God relays to us, hey guys, this is what you need to do to have the best outcome.
Yeah.
At that point, if hard determinism is a thing, do we then actually have free will because we know the future and can do it? But what we've done at that point is we've created a God out of this computer that can tell the future, and so then it gives us a roadmap of how to best live. Well, lo and behold, we take that roadmap and we go tell everyone, this is how we need to live best. And if you don't get in line, we're going to start a war. Well, we've just created a God and religion. Again, this is a very interesting, weird,
that's
thing.
A cool thought experiment.
It blew my mind when I was sitting in Cape Porpoise, and I was just like, that's really weird. And so there's that oddity there, that there's a full circle there that I don't know what it's telling me, but it's very odd to understand that and look at hard determinism and Calvinism and see how that works, and to see that you create the same situation we're dealing with now with religion in that manner. It's a very weird thing for me, and there's more thoughts that come off of that are also very weird. But once I get a hold on them, I'm gonna send you an email with them actually summarized.
Okay, cool.
And
I
you
look
can be
forward to
like,
that.
no, this is total junk. Dude.
Yeah.
What you got? But anyways, let's stay on track. So next, the self-deception.
Okay.
So for me, as I reflected on my belief structure and everything that I believed and what I was doing, and then looking at the community I was in, there's a lot of very sincere people, but that does not mean they're subconsciously self-deceiving themselves. And to me, a huge tell is that in church services, people come up front and they'll pray for cancer. And in some services, I don't know if you've driven by, do you know where, what is it? Autoland or Motorland over here?
Yeah.
As you're going to Motorland, on the left, there's a big tractor trailer and a little church, and it's something, and it's healing men.
I remember.
I'm going to have him here on one of these because that's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But people will come up and pray. Sometimes they're like, miraculously, we heal now. Or they're like, we think that there's a God that is deterministic and involved in our lives and reaches in and heals cancer.
Yeah.
But never once in those type of situations in a moderate church like that will you have people come up front to pray for an amputated limb to be regenerated.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a deterministic God that supernaturally can meddle with cancer and heal it, there's no difference. You can regenerate a limb.
Sure.
You know what?
Or grow a third one.
Yeah. No one will ever do that, because I feel that, like, I would have never done that, because I would have prayed for someone who had cancer and brought him up front or whatever, but I would never have done that. Now, why wouldn't I have done that? Because I feel like I know deep down that's either too much of a leap of reason, you know, even in a believing position, or I just didn't truly believe that God was doing anything and I was self-deceiving myself.
Yeah.
You know, that was like it was a humorous, trite observation that you tell people that, and they're like, well, wait a minute, you know, when it comes to self-deception, psychology, and philosophy, what's your take on all that?
Well, on the example that you gave, I think you're probably quite close to the mark. I would just add a little bit that I think when people pray for other people, it involves hope. Right? When you're praying for them, you're kind of rooting for them. You're hoping that something that you know is possible will occur. And this is dressed up in religious.
Yeah, I mean, cancer goes away.
Yeah,
sometimes.
there's spontaneous remission. There isn't any spontaneous remission for an amputated limb.
Yeah,
right?
that has remissed and is not.
You don't
back.
even hope for that, right? So the line that religious people would tend to take, in my experience, with that sort of thing, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong,
I'll pull from
is
my
that
experience.
This is part of God's plan that they lose their limb. Right.
Yeah, that's another weird thing, because I don't know how familiar you are with the Bible, but there's parts of it where
I used to teach it, actually.
Okay, so there's parts that say a prayer in faith will heal this person, and it's straightforward.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, then if I have enough faith, they'll be healed, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, with all my questioning and everything else, if one of my kids is in trouble in any way, shape, or form, I'll hit my knees still.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
If there's a chance, I'm taking it. But what a Machiavellian thing to put in a book to tell people that, well, God can do anything. And if you have enough faith, he'll heal them.
I think it's evil.
I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Because pray that God's will be done. I can maybe get behind an idea of there's something above us. You know, maybe we're not the most intelligent consciousness that there is in everything. I can get behind that idea of, you know, putting God in that place maybe. I don't personally see any evidence of that consciousness moving things around in our lives as much as other people say they do. But to put in a book that professes to have all this certainty and you know, lockdown on this, at least the way evangelicals will typically interpret it, is just so Machiavellian to like, well, that's on you. You didn't have enough faith.
Yeah.
You know, that's just so confusing.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what to do with that. But to me, it seems like there's a lot of self-deception going on. And that'll offend a lot of people that might listen to this. But I mean, for me, I feel like that's what I was doing a lot.
Yeah. I mean, if you want something to be true, if you really, really badly want something to be true, then it's easy to ignore considerations that count against it. That's just
those are biases.
Human psychology, right? So we're all subject to self-deception. In a religious community, though, there's something that's often really, really significant in this context, which is the patterns of thought that might disable certain forms of self-deception are not encouraged.
Right. So doubt is so valuable to us as humans. 'Cause
Yeah.
when you get the email from the Nigerian prince that's
Yeah.
trying to transfer his inheritance and just needs your help, what
Yeah.
do? You doubt.
Yeah. Sure.
And that saves you from opening your bank account to
Yeah.
some guy who's just trying to take your money, or girl.
That's right.
But that same critical thinking
Yeah.
is asked to not be applied too heavily when in a religious thing, unless you're from another religion, coming to another religion,
Yeah,
to
sure.
say, oh, guys, I'm Baptist, you're Mormon,
Yeah.
you should be a little doubtful of this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
I just, the honest
Well,
self-critical.
and if you think about it, it's way worse than the Nigerian scammer emptying your bank account. Here, your mind and your soul are getting emptied.
Yeah, it brings a host of, I know it brings a host of good things with it. Like it's not a everything about this is horrible, wrong, and
Of
evil.
course not.
But there's not a level of openness and honesty to actually holding it as belief.
Yeah.
It's not held as belief if there's a certainty and God said it, that settles
Yeah.
it. This is not an open discussion, you
Yeah.
know. That's where I have such an incredibly hard time with most all of American Christianity. Generally, the mass part of it will come across that way, I've found. And that's, yeah. And now I'm at this point, like I said earlier, that there's definitely my emotions have caught up to my knowledge. And now I'm like, oh, how do I emotionally adjust now? So that's a really hard part. I don't know the psychology of dealing with that. I am definitely less patient right now. I will argue more with my wife. I'm shorter with my kids. And I think a lot of it is because of, what I used to have as a solid foundation has just been pulled out. And, there's another thing I've been thinking is that anytime I have a moment to rest my mind, there's no place for it to land. It's constantly going and emotionally going because I've lost what I previously had where it could lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder about the danger of bringing children or humans up within such a certainty-based thing that when you do step back from that, it's an emotional...
Well, that's the problem. I think Freud makes a remark on that somewhere in his book, The Future of an Illusion. If you've been on crutches a long time, it's hard to walk, and there's a kind of intellectual handicap that you have to recover from. I mean, if in your early years, your life has been structured in this sort of way, and it's not merely a matter of belief, it's a matter of community, of the social practices.
But
and
here's
so-
the hard thing for me in that I never allowed myself to absorb into any community. I was influenced by it.
But you were embedded in it.
I was
surely.
embedded in it, and I absorbed their ideas of it and
Yeah.
what I should be, but I was still always a fence rider within it.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I'm like that too. So.
Okay. So we'll unite together separately in our own homes,
Yes.
kind of deal.
Yes.
So for you personally,
Yeah.
where do you find meaning? And this is coming from a genuine like, all right, crap, where do I find meaning now? As an atheist, I'm assuming,
Yep.
from our conversation.
Yep.
As an atheist, even now I think about it and I'm like, I love my kids just because I've evolved to do that and it's in the best interest of what I'm, been determined to do. But I'm just making, I feel like humanity now, I look at it and I look at an orange, it's bacteria is growing on it. And now with this different worldview, I'm like, geez, we're just bacteria on an orange. I feel like we're just growing and we're, pushing everything to extinction. We're overpopulating. I have this very dark view now of humanity that I don't like. That that is so different than where I was before. Like we had meaning and purpose, and there was someone waiting for us, drawing us to that. Now we're just.
So,
But and it's a hard thing to emotionally adjust, and that's where I'm at.
So, what is it
Give
about?
me some hope.
What is it? I'm not good at hope, generally speaking.
Most psychologists aren't. I listened to your debate on Jordan Peterson with the other professor, and it was very interesting to me that you said you listened to charismatic preachers when you were driving around.
Yeah,
It was interesting.
I find it fascinating. I really do, and actually, I think these are very, very skillful performers. Very skillful.
Yeah. If you read Ravi Zacharias is a big Christian apologetics guy who's intelligent and well received, well spoken. But I've heard criticisms from his biography, I think, where he realized his skills lied in this charisma and this ability to talk up front.
Yeah.
And charisma is an odd thing because it undercuts a lot of like the doubt or everything else you might exercise.
Sure, sweeps
like,
you along
well,
with those
man,
beautiful words,
these
those
are great.
rhythms, and those metaphors, and
But meaning. Where do you find
Okay,
it?
so I always get a little bit confused when people talk about meaning because I'm not sure what they mean by it.
What do you mean?
No,
by
this is true. So I think most people, I guess what you mean is like, what's the point of anything? Well, let me ask you a question. Your previous view, the view that you're struggling with leaving behind, how does that give anything any point?
It was the truth, right? And I don't mean that literally now, but is like, and this is what I am still thankful that I've pulled from that, is that truth was the most important thing.
Okay.
And that they felt they had the version of truth that, and I've kept that,
Okay.
Love, truth
Yeah.
are supremely
Right.
top of the pile important. And these are great things.
Yeah.
But now, meaning, like that, I don't know. It's such a hard thing for me to.
Why isn't? So you've taken two values. There are two values that are common to your position now and your position back then: love of truth and love of love, right? But for some reason, that isn't enough.
Where before I had this special idea in the back of my head that we were there was a speciality beyond this existence, and I didn't have to worry about this incredible blissful thing of becoming conscious then ending forever.
Okay.
And there was that. The meaning is that we do our best here and we help others come to this idea of truth, and then we can all live forever and discover more and more and more truth and explore the universe. And
So it sounds like you're saying, if you don't live forever, everything seems pointless.
It's a very selfish thing when I look at it now, oddly. Yeah. I'm ashamed that I can't refute that right now.
Well, there's no need.
Yeah, like
Maybe
if
you could
I'm not
just-
going to be around, what's it all matter? That's hard.
That's us human beings, right? Right.
I have so much to be ashamed of, so I'm just going to put that in line.
Look, I don't want to die either. The older I get, believe me, the more attractive it would be to, believe in an afterlife. And so I love life too much. And I've got too much to do still.
So much to do, so little time.
Yeah, and I'd like to see how things go, and I'd like not to leave the party until it's over. But I can't have everything I want.
Right.
So I make the best of what I have, and when I'm gone, I won't be there to regret it. David Hume, the philosopher David Hume, when he was dying of cancer in the year 1776, his friends came to see him, and one of them asked, "Are you not afraid of what happens after you die?" Hume was described as an atheist. And he said, "I won't be there. I won't be there." Right?
Right.
So in a way, it's very hard to picture our own non-existence.
Yeah.
What we tend to see...
By the way, that's one of the other ones that Oxford came up with, this bringing in the next higher power and the inability to comprehend cessation of your consciousness.
When we imagine it, we're always there. We're always an observer to our non-existence.
Yeah.
So we're still there. And then when we look at it in that way, it's like, oh crap, it's like being locked in solitary confinement while all these other things are going on.
Yeah, you're just not there.
So you can, all those values that were important and informed your life during your religious phase, those values can remain, but simply we have to let go of the kind of narcissism that nothing matters if we're going to die.
That is a realization that I am having right now that kind of plays into this narcissistic thing of, personally, for me, I can speak for me, realizing that I was probably pulling a lot of meaning from after this life.
Yeah.
And not all of it, I don't think, but definitely, that's a hard thing to admit.
I'm sure you think it's meaningful to go home and give your kids a hug. That has nothing to do with how long you exist, or how long they exist, for that matter.
Right. So my last question, basis for morals. Both myself and another friend have gone through this experience. Both of us the same, very, I call fundamental-ish religion. And for him, it was very much a... so Seventh-day Adventism has these really strict health codes, kind of like Mormonism, where, you don't drink... A lot of them drink coffee now, but typically it was like, don't drink stimulants, don't drink alcohol, you don't smoke, And for him, it was like just a few of these things. He was having a lot of questions and everything else, and he crossed the line on just very minor things. It was like, you know what? Everything's out the window. And I mean, it was party is on. And for me, though, nothing about my life morally did I want to change, and still haven't. I mean, I still don't drink or smoke, and I still eat healthy just because I want to, and I see the logic behind it, and I'm kind of cheap, and alcohol is expensive, and my wife still is previously what we believed very strongly. It would make her very uncomfortable, so I'm just kind of, I'll respect that, no big deal. But for him, it was definitely a hard thing of like, well, where do I get my morals from now? And for you personally, how do you assemble your moral compasses? Do you take a lot from humanism, or?
I don't assemble it. I mean, it just seems, doing the right thing just seems self-evident. I don't think any of the philosophical moral theories really work. Philosophers have been trying to figure this out for a long time. I guess if I were to stand back, this isn't the sort of deliberation I go through when I'm trying to decide what to do and what not to do. But if I stand back and say, well, what's the basis of morality? I guess it's one's answer to the question, what kind of a world do I want to live in? Given that morality is about everyone, right? It's not like there can't be one morality for me and a different one for you. If I held a moral position, I must think that the elements of that moral position are applicable to everyone. So what kind of a world do I want to live in? And that implies, what kind of a world do I want others to want to live in?
Thinking more, that's interesting.
Right?
That's interesting.
So, I want to live in a world where people are kind to one another, and I want everyone else to want to live in that sort of world.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's all there is to it.
Simplicity is nice. I like that. I really appreciate, again, you coming in. I'll let you get back to you're finally on summer break, and I really appreciate you taking some time away from
I'm
that
on
to come
summer. Academics often work harder in summer than during the semester. But, thank you for the wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it very, very
really
much.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
And
all the
we'll
best.
be in touch. Thanks again for tuning in on the YouTube channel or listening through the podcast. If you would like to support us, you can go to the Patreon page, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and please do subscribe to the YouTube channel and let us know your feedback. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like us to do different or to include in the future, or questions you'd like us to ask future guests, or the type of guests you'd like us to have in the future. Anything, let us know. Tell us if you'd like us to stop altogether and just completely go away. That could be an interesting conversation. But anyways, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast or YouTube episode, and tune in for the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.